right. Thank you, Ms. Pinion, for volunteering to work with us in the instructional coaching videos. And I just wanted to talk to you a little bit today. I know that we're going to try and have an observation soon. So I want to go through some of the pre-conference questions with you. If you could tell me a little bit more about the lesson I'm going to see. So just answer naturally, and we'll go through as many of the questions as we can in the time we have. So first, tell me, when do you think you want me to come into class for the observation?
Friday, probably 3rd. If that's an option. If not, then we can do another period.
Okay. No, that's all right. So 3rd period is the best for you, but you teach this class.
I do teach this class. I have 5 sections.
Okay.
So it's 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 6th, and 7th also.
Okay. So I'm going to do my very best to make it 3rd period. All right. So I know we're in a lab kind of situation. Where would you like for me to sit during the lesson?
So the lesson, we're going to start out by reviewing biogeochemical cycles, which are cycles important to the AP Environmental Curriculum in our ecology unit. And then once we do a review, groups of students are going to be working on mapping these cycles in an ecosystem collaboratively. So what you're going to see is you're going to see small groups, pairs and groups of 3 working together. So you're welcome to roam. You're welcome to make observations, interact with small groups. Essentially, if you want to find a spot and hang out in the spot, or if you want to, walk around with different small groups and interact, you're welcome to do whatever you prefer.
Okay. That sounds perfect. So that actually moved me into the next question. So I'm going to definitely go ahead and ask students questions. I want to hear their thoughts about the process. But at the beginning, right when I come in the room, before you've really gotten everything started, do you prefer for me to be in the back of the room, in the front of the room? Where do you think would be easiest? Okay. All right. And do not feel obligated to introduce me, but if you think it would make the students more at ease, then definitely feel free to tell them who I am, that I'm an instructional coach working here in the building, and that I just want to see what's going on in class. Okay. I want them to be at ease just as much as you. I'm not here evaluating anybody. So is there anything in particular about 3rd period that you want me to know about that class, like maybe a specific dynamic, or is this a particularly different group than some of your other class periods?
3rd period's a little more vocal, so they're a little more interactive. We have it's a little bit bigger than some of the other classes, so you'll kind of notice it's quite full. As far as the class itself, they many of them they've had a couple more AP classes under their belts than a couple of the other classes. So they're a little more confident with the curriculum, and they tend to be more interactive. So for the first go around, that interactivity would be helpful, I think.
Absolutely. Well, and it'll give you a picture of potentially best case scenario. If you have some of your most confident and most vocal students participating, you can see how well it's going to go. Are there any students in particular that, either you want me to pay special attention to, or perhaps might have some issues with during that class?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right. So we have talked before this session that I was going to utilize video much like we're doing today. So I'm going to find a way to video the lesson. We're going to borrow the Swivl again.
Okay.
But when I do this on the lesson, I want you to think, and I'm going to come back to this after we get through more of the questions. Would you prefer during the video, if I focus on the whole group and get as much of the classroom as possible, if I focused on maybe one small group to isolate their responses, or if I focused on, say, maybe you, and we gave you the tracker and it was watching and recording your movements with students? So you don't have to answer that now.
Okay.
But as we go through the lesson plan in your head, think about how you want us to use the video. So once we get to the lesson itself, you were telling me then that students are going to have a quick review, and then they're going to be mapping something you told me.
So it's called biogeochemical cycles.
Perfect.
So there's 4 main cycles according to the AP curriculum that we need to make sure that we are emphasizing. 2 of them are super important. So the carbon and nitrogen cycle are huge aspects of the AP exam in May, and we're building on it. So right now we're in our ecology unit, and we've introduced this in the last unit. We're building on it in this unit, and we're talking about how this applies to ecosystems. And so what they're doing is they will be given a scenario on campus where they are asked to map all 4 cycles in one system so that they can see the interaction that's taking place. And they also have a rubric that they will use to determine basically, what types of human interactions need to be present in their cycle, the particular drivers, so the processes that drive the cycle. So they'll use that rubric to guide this mapping process.
Okay, so then that's a really good overview. Do you have a specific goal for student learning, like a specific takeaway for them?
The application of the cycles in a particular ecosystem is very important. One of the biggest challenges that my AP students have is taking the content and applying it in multiple different scenarios. And I also want them to practice with the content. So that dialogue that we're looking for is very important. It gives them an opportunity to process with other students about what is happening in each cycle, what is a relevant example for them to map, what would not be relevant. So the goals with that are for them to use their graphic organizers that we've been working on all week and other tools to map this and interact with the content and look at the applications about when you are applying it to a particular ecosystem, what does it really look like?
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, I heard main goals for student learning. First is going to be that application of this biogeochemical cycle.
That's correct.
So main learning is that application, but then underneath that, you really want students to be able to practice having that important dialogue and practice talking about the relevance of all the, let's say, details that they use in their decision making for how they figure out how that cycle is going to work in their given scenario.
And it also helps to find any misconceptions that are still present. So as they're working through this, as they identify misconceptions, they'll have questions, they'll talk to each other, they'll talk to me. We'll work that out before we actually get to, so this is a formative assessment. Eventually they'll have a free response question that they'll write about this. So this is a step in that assessment process.
Good. So I'm glad that I asked you the follow-up. So this is a precursor to an FRQ.
Yes.
Okay. All right, let me note that real quick. Okay, so what has been going well in this particular class period?
So lots of interaction, lots of good discussion. They really, most of my students enjoy the lab activities. They enjoy the interaction with each other, and it does make for good discussion in class. And they tend to ask a lot of good questions about, and they also make a lot of connections between other classes. So we had a conversation earlier this week about we were talking about photosynthesis and respiration and making connections with other classes they've had as well.
That's awesome. Okay, so then where might there be some room for improvement with this group?
So this is where I have struggled in finding how to when you look at our AP scores on our tests, we have a lot of 4s and we have a good number of 2s and we have a small number of 3s. And nationally, that's what it looks like. So it's not just me, that's the national trend.
Okay.
And my goal going into this year was I want to figure out how, in essence, to move those 2s up right?
Okay.
So, and the goal is for everybody to shift. And one of the ways that I hope to do that is to focus on, one of the things I want to focus on is note-taking strategies.
Okay.
So when we're in AP Environmental, very often it's our first AP science class.
Mm-hmm.
We either don't know how to take notes or we don't want to take notes. And there's so much information that we're covering while it's a very active class. One of the things that I'm trying to encourage them to do with the organizers and the mind maps and all of these things are to take the information from the labs, take it from the lectures, take it from the discussion. So everything we're doing in class, take it and then tie it together. Look at the relationships. Look at how all of these cycles are interacting with each other in ecosystems. So it gives them an opportunity to organize the information and then practice using the information, and they're writing it down, which reinforces. So this is, I'm basically looking to see, does this tool help them organize the information and therefore apply the information? Okay. Does that make sense?
It does. And this actually, like, I had to improvise the next question once I heard you say that. So if I know that they're really working on the application and understanding of this cycle, they're utilizing their graphic organizer, which is the transference of that note-taking skill.
Yes.
Okay. So then what would be, let's say if that is kind of your learning goal in mind, what would be ideal for this particular lesson? At the end of the class, right, what would be the ideal outcome for this lesson, keeping that graphic organizer and that note-taking skill in mind?
So ideally what I hope to see is that students, they're going to encounter some roadblocks. They're going to ask questions, and I'm going to turn those questions back to them, right?
Okay.
Because I'm not necessarily just going to automatically, give them the answers.
Perfect.
So I'm going to shoot them back to the organizer. I'm going to shoot them back to content. I'm going to answer their questions with more questions. And they're going to hit roadblocks. They're going to have questions. There's going to be some gray area that they're going to struggle through, because they generally always do with this assignment. However, at the end, I hope that they are, first of all, more confident I hope that when they look at their diagram, they're able to explain it. So, like, towards the end, my hope is that when you're asking them questions, they should be able to explain, like, human interactions. So if you ask them, okay, what's going on here with this eutrophication, that they're able to explain that to you. That they're not just, and that's one of the reasons why I want them to draw this on campus.
Sure.
Because they can't copy another diagram. Like, they're actually having to apply it to a system, instead of just borrowing somebody else's knowledge.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's important information for me to know, so that when I'm interacting with the groups, I'm definitely going to make sure that I'm not just listening to what they say, but then I ask them, explain to me how you've laid this out in your drawing and what that graphic organizer is telling you. So I'll ask them some important questions to see how they're making progress towards that goal for you.
And this also helps me see before we get to the free response question, before we get to the unit test, what is it that I need to go back and what do we need to discuss? Are there any points that we continuously hit that maybe I've missed an instruction or haven't been communicated or something like that I need to follow up with?
Awesome. Okay, so then will I need any materials for this observation?
You will not.
All right.
Unless you want biogeochemical cycle background information, which I'm sure you don't have time for.
Don't worry. I'm going to have plenty of questions. I'm going to have lots of questions for the kids, so that's good. Okay, so then if I were, because we're going to video this lesson, right? What do you want to gain from, because you're going to look at that video afterwards, right? So this is a part where we either kind of set a goal or you tell me what you really want out of this experience. So when you look at the observation and when we have our interaction afterwards, are you interested in setting a particular goal, whether it's for student learning, whether it's for time on task or something like that? Or are you looking to just kind of, this is the first one, I want to get a clear picture of reality in my classroom? Like, what What might you like to gain from this observation?
I would like to kind of see like conversations that are taking place in groups. So looking at dialogue and looking at dialogue around cycles, are they able to answer each other's questions? Because that's kind of one of the hopes of it, is that collaboratively, when they have questions, they will be able to work with each other.
Well, and it's still early in the year, so
yes,
I think it's a good
absolutely.
idea that, so what I'm hearing you say is we're going to get a clear picture of current reality, what it looks like in those small group conversations. So especially if you're spending most of your time reflecting their questions back to them, right? Go to the graphic organizer or following up their question with another question. Then you're still putting all the onus on them to have that conversation within the group, and you're going to then want to see how are they functioning. How are they able to discuss things? So I think the video will be a great way to do that. Are you interested in me taking any kind of data for you while I observe? For example, I could measure with the lesson that you're describing. I could consider measuring teacher talk versus student talk, though I imagine this one's going to be a high student talk ratio. I could also script the question that you are asking, and as I circulate, I could script the questions and the answers that I hear students asking, so that when you look at that video, you'll know what kinds of things they were saying.
Those two sound good.
Does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay, I think I'm going to focus on that level and types of questions, and I'm going to do my best to script as many questions as possible, so that when you're with a group, you already hear them. I'll be somewhere else in the room with the group that you're not with, writing down some of their questions. All right, so you know that I'm going to give you a copy of this document. How do you want me to share the data that I take during the observation? Do you want me to email it to you or just make a copy of my script notes?
Easiest.
Okay. I will probably handwrite. That's the fastest way to move around, especially in a small group. So I will just make a copy for you. And I'll drop it in your mailbox as soon as the observation is done. All right. Before we finish up, is there anything else you want me to know?
I think so.
Before we observe? All right. I wanted to come back to you about the video. So now that we've talked it through a little bit and you know I'm going to be moving between groups, do you want me to have the video focus on whole room, on you as a teacher, and just where you're moving, or like stay with one particular small group?
Can we do a combination?
I don't know. We will see. What combination were you looking for?
Well, I think if it stays on one group the whole time, that could potentially make them a little apprehensive.
Probably self-conscious.
Perhaps, you know what I'm saying?
I agree.
So, and then that could shut down some of the natural dialogue that could, that I really hope for. If they're, if the it's right there. So I was just trying to look for a, I don't know, just a healthy combination. But if we can't do it, we'll.
Well, let me suggest this, and then we'll see how it actually plays out on that day. So we can start with whole room. Right? And then if you're holding this marker, like if you wear it like a lanyard, the Swivl is going to follow you from group to group, and it's going to capture your audio. So we can do that as they get started. And then if you find that you want to hear for a couple of minutes from one particular group, you can take off the lanyard and, just like we've got it here, put it right in the middle of their table. I think the only suggestion I would say is at the beginning or maybe the day before the lesson, tell them that we're recording it for your professional growth. And it sounds like this group has a great dynamic, that if you can be honest with them and say, I'm looking to see what levels of conversations are happening, what myths or misconceptions are out there, so that we can address them before that big unit test, then that'll put them at ease. and not that they're being graded, right? And so hopefully you can, put this down in the middle of a group and say, y'all are having a great conversation, but I need to check with another group. This will capture some of your comments.
Okay.
And then move on. And then if I see this in the middle of a group as well, I may or may not go over and interact with them too, so that I don't interrupt the flow.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Okay, so we're going to try for a combination then, and you can use the lanyard to help you with that. I think after the observation, once we get that under our belts, then we'll set up a time for the post-conference afterwards.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yes, it does.
All right. Thank you for your time today. I will see you on Friday.
Thank you.